Once again, I welcome you all back on History EduLearn. Today, let us study 10th Standard 8th lesson, Emergence of Nationalism in India. This lesson is divided into 4 subtopics. The first we will be studying about introduction and background of this lesson. Then we will be studying about the birth of Indian National Congress, the era of moderates and extremists, and the fourth, the Gandhian era. To begin, let us understand the background and the introduction of emergence of nationalism in India. Nationalism emerged in India in the 19th century. There were several factors responsible for the rise of nationalism in India. The major factors were introduction of Western education and English language. Now, Britishers wanted Indians to understand their language so that they can have a fluent functioning of administration in India. It was because of the Western education in India, Indians realized of the liberty, equality and right of the people to be free and get the freedom from colonial rule.
The English language brought educated Indians from different parts of the country on same platform, where they could exchange their ideas and chart out common program to demand freedom from British government. In fact, this move had boomerang on East India Company. Indians got access to Western education and literature. They realized how common masses of America, France brought independence from colonial and monarchic government in their respective countries. Many educated Indians started thinking on same line of reformation and revolution. They wanted political change in India, demanded British shall leave India immediately by granting them independence.
The entry of Europeans in India started with the revival of sea route in the 15th century. In 1498, Vasco da Gama was the first European who discovered sea route to India.
British initially entered as traders in India, but very soon they started taking interest in the political affairs of India with the intention of exercising political control over the country. The British traders formed the East India Company in the year 1600 CE in London.
They intensified trade activities in India, and for that matter, they asked for concession from the local rulers. However, the situation was more worse and alarming when they defeated some of the rulers and also annexed some of Indian states.
The victory in the Battle of Plassey in 1757 gave them a stronghold in the country, and it opened the floodgates for British trade and politics in India.
Next, company waged another battle with the Nawabs of Bengal. They fought this in 1764 at Buxar. This battle was won by British, and British got full right to collect Diwani in the province of Bengal. At that time, Bengal was made up of present-day Bihar, Bengal and Orissa. It was a huge province. This led to the economic exploitation of India. However, the discontent in the minds of Indian masses started flaring up, and they started opposing the British policies of economic exploitation, the racial supremacy and political domination. Economic exploitation that was brought by introducing several revenue policies in India. Secondly, the racial supremacy, the blacks and the whites, they started treating Indians as unequal and inferior to that of the white Europeans. And thirdly, political domination. They annexed several states in India, and that created some kind of bitterness in the mind of Indians.
During this time, British passed several acts, laws in India, like ban on sati practice, ban on child marriage, promoted widow remarriages, and so on. Indians thought British were doing this intentionally to hurt their religious sentiments. This too was one of the reasons for Indians to unite for fight against colonial rule. All these factors resulted in a major revolt against the company's rule in 1857, which was called as the First War of India's Independence. The revolt was brutally suppressed by the British, and Queen's Proclamation of 1858 brought the administration in India under the aegis of Queen Victoria of England. With this, the rule of British East India Company in India came to an end, and India was directly ruled by Queen Victoria of England.
During this period from 1858 to 1885, the feeling of nationalism amongst Indians was intensified.
Indians became conscious of their economic and political exploitation. There emerged a group of middle-class young men who believed in using violent methods to achieve independence. These revolutionaries founded a number of secret organizations, managed to get arms and published newspapers in foreign countries.
In 1879, Vasudev Balwant Phadke, the first armed revolutionary, staged armed revolution against British in India. On 22nd June 1897, Damodar Safekar shot W.C. Rand, who was a commissioner of a plague commission in India.
For this, he was sentenced to death by British government. Simultaneously, during this period, a number of provincial organizations in different provinces, states were established, whose demands were of national character. They prepared the background for creation of a national association to demand India freedom, and that was Indian National Congress or INC.
After having brief introduction to emergence of nationalism in India, let's move on to the formation of Indian National Congress INC. This was the first national level organization or the first political party functioning at national level in India. This was formally founded on 20th December 1885. The first session of INC was held at Bombay. The first president was W.C. Banerjee or Umesh Chandra Banerjee, and its first national secretary was Govan Kashinath Trimbak Telang, popularly known as K.T. Telang. The one of the founder member of INC was British civil servant named as A.O. Hume. The main objective of INC was to discuss the several national issues pertaining to India and the Indian masses and placing their demands in front of British government in a peaceful method. So that was what the purpose of INC.
The beginning phase of Indian National Congress is described as the moderates period or era of moderate, that is from 1885 to 1905. This was the period when leaders of the party such as Umesh Chandra Banerjee, Surendranath Banerjee, Justice Ranade, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Firoz Shah Mehta, Pandit Motilal Nehru and others had adopted constitutional and peaceful methods to put forward their various demands, including that of the Swaraj. The leaders sent their demands in the form of memorandum, writ petitions and appeals. This was the period also remarked as the petition politics.
Dissatisfied with the petition politics, one of the group within INC started working aggressively against the British. In the year 1904, there was one prominent revolutionary called Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, popularly known as Swatantraveer Savarkar, founded a revolutionary organization called Abhinav Bharat. The work of revolutionary movement was prominently carried out from the provinces of Bengal and Maharashtra. The leaders like Prafulla Kumar Chhaki, Khudiram Bose, Senapati Bapat, Shamji Krishna Verma were prominently working as a revolutionaries.
The methods of moderates proved to be ineffective because their demands were not met by the British government. Instead of granting liberties, the British Viceroy Lord Curzon brought about the partition of Bengal in 1905 under the pretext that Bengal was too large province to be effectively administered. But the real intention was to follow the policy of divide and rule to separate Hindus and Muslims of Bengal. East Bengal and West Bengal were split on the basis of religion. Muslims were in majority in East Bengal while Hindu population was dominant in West Bengal. Thus, British divided Hindus and Muslims in India with partition of Bengal in 1905. This triggered off differences among the Congress leaders because moderates still had faith in British government, whereas the extremists were convinced that they have to fight for their demands and not plead for it, not pray for it, no petitions henceforth. Finally, in 1907, the Indian National Congress split at Surat session in Gujarat. And this led to the second stage of freedom struggle, which is called an era of extremists. The extremists were mainly led by Lalaji Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Bipin Chandra Pal, popularly known as Lal Bal Pal. But the influence of Tilak was dominant. The year 1905 was starting point of extremist policies in Indian politics. It strengthened the extremist ideology in the freedom struggle. It grew among the younger generation of the Congress party who were unhappy with moderates' policy of 3 Ps, that is petition, protest and prayers. They wanted to follow more aggressive method and were the strong belief that the Swaraj has to be demanded and not pleaded. It was at this time that Lokmanya Tilak said that Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it. They made the Indians aware of their glorious past and thus developed self-respect among them. Realizing the self-respect is most important, and that was the work done by freedom fighters during this time. They used Swadeshi and boycott as effective weapons against the British rule. Swadeshi, use of indigenous, and boycott the foreign goods. Tilak started public celebrations of Shivaji festival and Ganesh festival to bring the masses together and spread the feeling of nationalism among them. They started the spread of national education to sow the seeds of nationalism by creating a sense of pride in one's nation. This is most important to realize and love the self-nation. They also started a number of newspapers to spread these ideas, like Maratha and Kesari were started by Tilak, New India by Bipin Chandra Pal, Bande Mataram by Aurobindo Ghosh. The influence of Tilak was dominant during the phase. It is said that he laid the foundation of mass participation in freedom struggle. He also participated in the Home Rule movement along with Annie Besant. Gandhiji had rightly called Tilak as the maker of modern India. It was during the second phase that in 1906 Muslim League was formed, which had worked in close cooperation with the British government. Along with the policy of divide and rule and repression, British used political reforms to appease the moderates and Muslims and passed the Morley-Minto reform in 1909, which increased the number of seats in legislature and provided for separate electorate for Muslim. Here you are asked question, which reform provided for separate electorate for Muslim, and answer is Morley-Minto reform of 1909. From 1908 to 1911, there was a lull in the Indian freedom struggle because most of the extremist leaders were arrested by the British government. In 1919, Montagu-Chelmsford Reform was passed, by which a limited part of provincial administration was handed over to Indians. Diarchy was introduced in India. This did not please the extremist leaders who decided to continue the struggle. In the meanwhile, British government continued with repressive policies and passed the Rowlatt Act known as Black Act, which authorized British officers to arrest anyone on suspicion and imprison them without trial. This led to nationwide protest. Gandhiji called for an all-India hartal. The response was overwhelming. Towns and villages in every part of country participated. On 13th April 1919, Jallianwala Bagh massacre took place at Amritsar in Punjab, when people had gathered to protest peacefully. The Jallianwala Bagh was an open enclosure surrounded by buildings. An estimated number of 15,000 to 20,000 people had gathered for a meeting. Brigadier General Reginald E.H. Dyer and his men opened fire without any warning. People were killed in hundreds and many were crushed in the stampede. Curfew was imposed following the firing, and so no medical aid could be provided. This incident exposed the inhuman side of the British rule and gave rise to the non-cooperation movement throughout the nation. On 1st August 1920, Lokmanya Tilak passed away, and this marked the end of era of extremists.